Hello and welcome to my UDK tutorial series. In this first episode I'm going to be going over CSG. And by going over the CSG I'll kind of be doing sort of how to set up an initial level type thing. But I'm not really going to be doing a tutorial specifically on that. It's just specific elements of the thing. So you will end up having a playable level by the end of this. But that's not what this is going to be about. This is going to be about CSG. And before I get started, I want to give kind of a little warning type thing about CSG usage. Now, first off, pretty much any programmer or anyone that's doing anything with video games knows that you want to make sure that your game is running efficiently on computers so that everyone can run it, if possible. Not everyone, but as many people as possible can run your game. CSG is not the most efficient thing to use because of the way it renders textures. It kind of has to render them sometimes multiple times throughout the game, while static meshes do not. They just render themselves and they're in, and you don't have to worry about them having to render themselves multiple times. In most cases, but like 90% of the time. CSG is a little bit more memory intensive. Not hugely, but if you had like an entire level made out of CSG and an entire level made out of static meshes, you would notice a difference, memory-wise. And you can't really do as much with CSG as you can with static meshes. Now there are quite a few benefits to CSG. I'll cover those as we go through. But you really want to be careful with how you use your CSG. Mostly they're used as a kind of thing, sort of as a placeholder. Like you can build a road of some kind and just have it made out of CSG, apply a quick texture, and then come back later if you need to and replace that with a static mesh that's custom made for your road. So you can kind of just hold it for placeholders. If you're a level designer, you can use CSG as a placeholder for later on static meshes so that you can kind of get busy doing other things and get an idea of what it would need to look like anyway as you build other things around. You can use it for buildings, very easily build large buildings, square ones. Okay, you can't really build fancy looking buildings unless you have a modeler and import a static mesh, but you can build large buildings very quickly and apply textures to those, kind of get some things if you're building a city so that you can kind of get an atmosphere for things and start working on stuff. And again, they're not the best to use, so you don't want to load down your level with a bunch of CSG brushes. But anyway, now on to learning how to use them, because I talked about them long enough. So, I have a completely blank level here, as you can see. My static cursor for like 5 minutes as we were, well, technically 3 minutes as we were talking about this. But I have a blank level here. You can just go up to this, file, new level, or this little file button here and just do blank map. And there's nothing here. Like if I go to game mode, it's blackness, no lighting whatsoever. I don't even have a spawn point. Couldn't find a starting spot. So, there's no spawn point either. There's nothing here except this red brush. What is this red brush? Is it like a fancy ghost block of some sort? Are we in Pac-Man? Tron, maybe? I don't know. Well, this builder brush is going to be our friend when it comes to CSG, because he doesn't place a CSG, but CSG it's you use brushes to work with CSG. Essentially, the way it works is a brush will define an area where the CSG goes, and wherever the brush is the CSG goes inside of that. So you don't just like place it in like you would like an object, like a static mesh of some sort. you basically you build the area that you want it to go inside. So if you wanted a wall, you would have like just the thickness of the wall and then how long the wall is, and that would be the area that the CSG goes inside. That's kind of how it works. Now, this builder brush places the brushes that allow you to do that. So it can be a little complicated, but it makes sense once you start using it. The builder brush doesn't do that, of course. You can place volumes of all sorts. You've got all kinds of things that you can place with this. So it's an all-around kind of general tool that allows you to place all kinds of volumes, brushes, and things of that nature. So to begin, of course, you can move this around wherever you want. It doesn't really matter right now because there's nothing really there, so you can just leave it where it is. It doesn't really matter where you place anything right now. And then you can change the shape as you see fit. All of these, of course, have right-click options. If you right-click on things, you can get different options. And they're all different. I mean, they have some similarities, of course. Inner radius, you have a radius. XY, and the cube has an XY and a Z that you can change. But they are all different because they're all different shapes. I'm going to be using the cube for the majority of this tutorial. Well, pretty much all of it. Because that's the only one I ever use, because again, CSGs aren't the most efficient things, and I've never needed a different shape. Now, one other thing I want to mention is this is not a sphere, it's a tetrahedron. Okay, this is not going, it may look like this and you're just thinking, well, it'll make a sphere on the outside. It's not. It's going to make this shape. If you want a sphere, you're going to need to get now, I mean, you can fiddle with the things. You can do like maybe a 10, and you can get this. But if you notice, there are a lot of triangles in this. So, I mean, you can get a sphere, but you would really want to use a static mesh because you can really reduce memory usage because you have a lot of points on this. Okay. Actually, I haven't messed with this much, and you can only go up to 5, as you can see. I haven't really messed with that much, so I wasn't entirely sure. To be honest, I wasn't entirely sure that would work, because I'm just stupid like that. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, you can get a sphere, but like I said, there are a lot of points on this. So this has just FYI, interesting fact: the default cube, like this, is about as high as a player. Just so you know. So like this isn't even that large because the cube is this size. Okay, the sphere is this. So that's a little taller than the player. So if you wanted to make like one that was really big, that the player could like walk inside and like some giant dome thing, that could be really a big of an issue with memory usage. But anyway, like I said, we're going to be going through with the cube. Now the cube does have an option to be hollow. So what this does is it doesn't just say, okay, it's going to be hollow on the inside. It actually adds 2 of these, and the CSG brush will just be in between this. Okay, so it just adds like a smaller thing in the middle. Now note, it's not even on the ground, so there is a space on the ground, or the floor, where the floor would be. There is a thickness thing, so you need to keep this in mind whenever you're working with this, so that you don't like mess something up and it be at the wrong size, because this isn't going to be just completely even with the bottom of this. There's going to be a spacing between these two, and it's kind of like suspended in the very center. Now, of course, you can adjust the wall thickness. 16 is a bit high, actually, believe it or not. So if we do like 5, that is it's a pretty good thickness. Maybe a little thin. I don't want to sit there and play with it all day long. It's not actually necessary to hit the build button. I mean, if you were to type 7, you could hit build, but usually because I'm using the keyboard already, so I'll just hit like 8 and then hit enter, and it does the same thing as build. Enter, I just use enter all the time, so you don't really need to hit build if you don't feel like you want to. You can just hit enter. But enough talk. Let's go ahead and hit the CSG add button, and nothing at all happens. There was a blue line there, but other than that, nothing happened. Okay, Mr. Tutorial person, this is not working out for you. Actually, it's there, but we're in lit mode. Okay, so we have to switch because there's no lighting at all anywhere. Like when we switch to game mode, you can't see anything, right? There's no lighting, so we can't see it. It's there, but we can't see it because there's no light to bounce off of it. If we go to unlit mode, there it is. So we have this really high definition blue and gray, purple and gray texture that is just amazingly beautiful in every shape and form. And I use it everywhere, all over the levels, for every single texture that there is, because that would just be amazing. Now, if we go inside, we can see that it is indeed hollow. Okay. And it's the same thickness on every single wall, the ceiling, and the floor. Now, we can change this later, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Now, this is, it's inside the builder brush still. But here's the thing. If we move the builder brush out of the way, it's retaining its, shape. And this is still here. Now, if I switch, I can't see, you can't actually access the brush itself unless you're in wireframe mode or brush wireframe mode, okay? But I'm going to switch to that now. So I'm going to go to brush wireframe mode, and now we have this blue thing right here. What is this blue thing? If we go back to unlit mode, you can see it's actually the thing that's the CSG is inside. The builder brush places this brush. It will make a duplicate of itself, essentially. And then you can, that's how the builder brush works. It makes a duplicate of itself where you want the brush or volume to be. That's essentially how that works. And then you can actually copy this thing. I can right click on it and do like copy, and then drag this over here and do like paste, and it will make copies, and you can duplicate, and you can do all that kind of stuff with this. But to initially get started, you have to have the builder brush. So that's how that works. But I want to go ahead and talk really quick about the difference between the wireframe and brush wireframe. If I go to wireframe mode, you can see that there's an additional, there's this. What is this? If we go to unlit mode, that's actually where this is, okay? So wireframe mode will tell you all the information you need to know. And we have the brush here, and it's giving me the brush, and they give me the builder brush, but it's also telling me where the actual texture and the actual CSG is, and it's defining that area and the triangles and how that's all laid out. I prefer just brush wireframe because your CSG is always going to be inside a brush. So now that I've moved this, I actually have to rebuild my geometry up here. Okay, you have to click build geometry to get an update. It gives you a preview, but if it would have to it has to recalculate once you start moving stuff around. So if I do that, it's going to move it over there. And now I'm in wireframe mode, and we have this. Okay. So now it's actually overlaying the exact area. I just prefer going in brush wireframe because I don't really need to see all this. So brush wireframe will get rid of the CSG wireframing there. So that's really the only difference there, is just brush wireframe kind of shows you these brushes here. Notice actually if I go into wireframe, I can't see the brush actually at all. I can't interact with the brush in any way, shape, or form. I have to go to brush wireframe to see that. So that's usually your best option. And I mean, you can move this then, and then go to wireframe mode, and then you have it still selected. Now if I click off, it disappears. So keep that in mind. But we're going to do that. Alright, so we go into unlit, we can see it, and we have this selected so we can do stuff with it. Now you can hit F4, and there's options here. And you can actually change it from add to subtract, intersect, de-intersect, and you can change the brush itself. So these are, once you make one of these, they don't have to be just that, and then you have to delete it and then replace it with something else to get a different type of brush. You can actually just change it here through the properties. And there are, of course, all kinds of other options that you can mess around with. Not too many for this, but you have collision type, which you shouldn't really need to worry about. It says no collision, but the brush itself doesn't have a collision. The CSG does. So it's a little complicated, but and you have attachment for physics stuff. But you shouldn't really need to worry about that. The only thing you're going to really need to use is this. So that's that. Now the other thing with these is that you can use the geometry editor for the CSG brushes, and this is the only thing that you can use the geometry tool, I just prefer editor, for, is CSG brushes. You can't do this with static meshes. You can't do this with like particle systems or cinematics or anything else except CSG brushes. And what this basically does is allows you to just change the shape of it at will. So I can like drag this up, and now I have a taller ceiling. Now here's an important thing to remember when working with hollow shapes. Okay, that's just this is actually going to fill in the area between these two. Okay, remember that. It's going to fill in the area between these two. So now I just have a really, really thick ceiling. Okay, now if I go... Now one other thing about the CSG that it kind of can get a little annoying is it only selects the most outside face. So I would actually have to go inside this and select like this top face. Actually, I'd have to go down and then select it from the bottom, is the way it wants me to do it. So you kind of have to sometimes fly around a little bit and maneuver yourself to be able to select the right face. But I've got this one selected, and so now I've actually raised my ceiling, because it's going to fill in this area. No, it's going to fill in like this area here, and on the very inside there's going to be nothing. Okay, so it can be a little confusing working with it, but you get the hang of it after a while. So you can move stuff around, and you can actually do control clicking. So if I go in here and then I select the back end of this, then I can just drag both of these at the same time, and it works much better, and I can just make the room bigger like that, and it's much easier. Of course, you can't really do that with opposite sides. Well, actually, no, you can. So if I do this and do that, if I try moving it this way, what's going to happen is it's going to move it diagonally this way. So now it's diagonal. Okay, and I've got a diagonal wall. And if I move it back, the same thing occurs. So you want to keep that in mind whenever you're doing stuff, is you can get diagonals, because it's literally just moving it in a straight line. Okay, but what you can do, and actually you can't actually get away from that. It's always just going to be moving it like that, and sometimes that can get annoying because you don't want to be moving stuff, diagonally or something. And I'll explain like why you wouldn't want to do that here, because there's as you can see, there's other options here. Like if now some of them are okay. I'm sorry, I'm not making sense. Let me just start over. There are other options here, as you can see. Some of them are grayed out because you can't do that with the current selected thing. Now you don't have to just select faces. You can actually select these vertexes, and notice some of them go away, but other ones reappear, or appear because they haven't appeared to begin with. So appear. And then you can also select these edges. The edges are very difficult to select, and I wish it was easier to do so, but unfortunately that was easy to select, but sometimes they're not that easy. What I can do with this actually is split it, and what happens is now I have this room is cut in half. So what it looks like. And I can do this because now I can actually start messing around with stuff, and if I select this and start moving this out, notice this is becoming diagonal. Okay, well, I don't want that. I don't want there to be like a diagonal wall. I just want this to be a corridor that, you know, they would be able to come out into, the players or player. So I can select this back here, and it's moving a diagonal. I don't want that. If I click extrude right up here, what's going to happen is it's actually, technically, it's making a new set of vertices. So you want to be careful when you use this, because watch. Now it's actually making a new set of vertices. And every time I click this, it's making a new set of vertices. So now I've got like a lot of vertices because I've clicked it several times. And for some stupid reason, it's not going out any farther than that, and I don't understand why. I've got both sides selected, but see, I have a lot of new vertices now, so you do want to be careful when you use the extrude tool, but it can be very useful in some cases. If I go over here, maybe it'll work. Yeah, so there we go. So now I can just drag this out, and voila, you have this huge corridor. If I would have to extrude this other one first. There. So now I have a very large corridor, okay, that they can go through. So that's kind of how that works with the extrude. So it's kind of like auto splitting it for you, but you do actually have to split something first that you can then have this option. And CSG can be a little annoying with, you know, playing around with it and getting it to get the shape that you want, which again is why you would want to use static meshes. But it is useful for making large buildings and corridors and hallways and walls and things like that. Corridor and hallway is the same thing. I'm being repetitive. Alright, that's pretty much all there is to it, to the geometry tool. You have a pen. I don't really use the pen much. You know, you've got options there, but I don't really use this. I just use extrude and edit. Yeah, I know I haven't shown you all these options. Optimize, well, I guess it kind of takes care of a lot of those things, so that helps. Flip would, I guess, not do. Well, I guess that would help you whenever you're working with this stuff, because it'll actually flip the flippable side that you can click on. So flip it, and now it's on top. So that's useful. So, you know, you can do that. So if you wanted to flip stuff around that you could be able to click on, you can do that. It wouldn't really do much otherwise than you'd be able to just click on stuff. Delete, obviously, that's self-explanatory. Triangulate. So there you go. Now you got a triangle in the center. Oh, wow. This is going to sound really bad, but I didn't know that did that. Haven't really played around with those tools because I just hadn't taken the time to learn what they were. But that is useful. So you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time trying to select a vertice. Although it's only triangles, so if you wanted, you know, triangle rooms, that's perfect. But if you didn't, then it would be not quite what you wanted. But, you know, there you go. You have a triangulate thing. And then, you know, you could click extrude and then extrude this up. So there you go. So you have a really weird looking building, but it's a building nonetheless. So, you know, you could click on things and see what they do. Turn. Can't actually turn that. So, you know, there's that. I guess turn would, in this case, if I select this one. Oh, okay. You know, you could just flip it around, but whatever. Weld, create. I don't know. But moving these actual vertexes around can sometimes give you some cool effects, because you can then, you know, take these, or the edges, or the points, whatever. Because then you can take, you know, these triangles and do things with them. Alright, enough of the geometry tool. We have this. Now, make sure by the way, because if we go back, we still have this only cube here, so make sure you rebuild. And now we have this. Okay, we can go inside, and we've got this. Now, that's kind of glitching out because it's being derpy like that. But as you can actually, if you look in here, there's a lot of like smaller tiny spaces. So this is like a really poorly made building. It's being derpy and all that good stuff. But you know, we have a building. I'm actually going to delete this because this is just so bad looking. So delete. Now again, it's still here, so you want to make sure that you rebuild, and then it's gone. So what we're going to do is I'm going to CSG add, drag that over here, select this brush, scale, well, go in the geometry tool, and kind of just take this side and drag that out a bit. No. There. So drag that out a bit with it. And then I'm also going to do the same thing for the top. This isn't going to be a very large room, but it is indeed going to be a room. Okay. So there. We could do build. And so that we can kind of get in, we can look at this in lit mode instead of unlit mode. I'm going to add a light. I'm not going to cover lighting in this tutorial, but if you want to add a basic light, there's several ways to do this. You can do add actor, add light point. Now we have a light. Or you can actually hold control, hit L. Well, don't hold control, my bad, I'm stupid. Hold L and click, and you have a point light. So just delete this one, and now we have a light in here. And it automatically actually switched us to lit mode, if you noticed. So let me delete this. It's going to automatically switch us to unlit mode because it detects there's no lighting. Now watch up here. Okay, watch right there. And I'm going to hit L, click, and it automatically switched it. So that's useful of UDK, that it does that. But anyway, we're just going to kind of move that in the center of the room. Notice everywhere else it is dark, but in the center of the room, you know, we're fine in here. Again, pretty small room, but we get what we get. And I'm going to add a quick spawn point. So we do add actor, add player start. And if you remember, if you watched my other tutorial, well, actually I didn't cover this. I'll cover this in a separate thing. But you can get to these if you go to the content browser, actor classes, and you can just add a player start right there. And I will cover all of these things in its own tutorial because this all stuff is complicated. But there's another way to get to that. Easiest way, of course, is context menu, right-clicking, add actor, player start. So there you go. Move this down, and it always does this for me. Don't worry about that, really. It's not that big of a deal. It's not going to really affect anything. And I want to scale this down so I can see things. Oh, I screwed that up. There. So, you know, you can actually edit the size of the pictures, and it doesn't affect anything with the properties. It just changes the size of the picture. But now we can see this more clearly. See this arrow right here? That edge of the point is kind of going to be where they spawn. Not their feet, kind of like the middle of them. They'll just be kind of spawning. You have to kind of experiment with moving it up and down to really get a feel of about where they spawn. I could move this image slightly into the ground, and they would be fine. They would kind of spawn on the floor. But anyway, and you can also rotate this around to have them face in a certain direction if you wanted to. And you can rotate it in any direction. So if I wanted my guy to face down whenever he spawned in here, I could do that. And I'm going to actually move it up a bit so he falls a little bit. And then, now it's back. Good. Okay. Now, I'm going to rebuild my geometry real quick. Just 'cause. I'm going to build my lighting, okay. real quick. It shouldn't take long. Now, the first time you do this, you're going to have, like, Windows security alerts and all this from Swarm Agent, but it's fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. The Swarm Agent is just the thing that calculates the lighting for you. So, no worries. So that's done, calculated lighting. And actually, if you notice, now the lighting looks different. It looks different than it did before. And we are in lit mode. And that's just because it was giving us, the editor was giving us a preview, So it can't do a perfect job. You always have to make sure that you build your lighting to get a good idea of what the lighting looks like. Now, if I move this at all, it's actually going to revert back to preview. So notice how it did that. So if I undo, it didn't change at all, and I would still have to build the lighting. But anyway, if you move anything at all, the lighting gets off and it has to recalculate everything. So try not to do that too often, or you'll really be getting angry at yourself for how long it's taking you to do level design. But let's go ahead and jump. I have to freaking rebuild the lighting. See, it's annoying whenever you move something, because even if you move it back, it doesn't matter. So there we go. So, not going to move anything. If I hit play level. So again, this is a pretty small room. But let me see. Okay, so I was wrong about the fact that you could change where they look. I was pretty sure that that's what they did. Well, anyway. So I apologize. I thought that that's what they did. Oh well. But you did see, I'll move this up so you can see a little better the effect of it. They did fall a little bit though. So that kind of fell a little bit. Hung there for a second and then fell a little bit as physics actually took a hold. Okay. So we have this room in here. It's kind of ugly, to be honest. So I want to change some of the textures. So let's go to the content browser. And I'm going to search for something in this search bar. Make sure all assets are clicked. Okay. And I'm going to search for walls. Or just wall. And then I'm going to check materials. Now, if that's not in your favorites, then you could go to all types and just scroll. It's in alphabetical order and scroll until you find materials. Just materials, not any of these others, just materials. But that'll limit it to just things that you can actually place on these walls. And pretty much any material can be placed on these walls at this point. Anything that you see that you want to place on here. I'm going to pick you. No, actually I don't want you. Let's go with this one. So I'm going to put this on actually all four sides. And you just drag it on there. That's really all. It's that simple. You can right click, and then apply material if you wanted to, but that's really a lot more complicated. And if you have multiple monitors, it's really helpful to just like slide this over into another monitor, full screen it, and then you can just drag across and actually place stuff on there too. It works that way. UDK is very good with multiple monitors, but I'm going to drag that onto the ceiling, and just to show you how it works, I can do apply material, and there we go. So minimize this, and it's just going to stay right there. And again, I'm going to have a tutorial on the content browser. It may or may not be before this one in the playlist or number. I don't know at this point, but I'm going to have a tutorial on that. And again, I don't even know if it's going to come out before this video is aired. Regardless, we have materials, and it looks a lot better. We can actually go in here without having to update the lighting either. So, that's cool. But if you think about it, the lighting doesn't really accurately reflect what this looks like. It really doesn't. And I'll show you, actually, that the lighting will change depending on the textures that you have. And I know this isn't supposed to be a lighting, tutorial, but I kind of just want to touch on this real quick, because it won't take long. The way the lighting works in UDK is really cool. It kind of gathers the colors from all this other things and kind of changes the lighting just a bit. So actually, if you look, there was a slight change, and you can go back in the video and look at it before. But now it has a bit more orange to it, and it kind of more accurately kind of looks like the lighting would look in this room. Now the lighting itself is white, but it's kind of spreading itself around, so it kind of looks, you know, it looks better. So that's that. But as for the textures in the CSG goes, they're pretty good about updating themselves as you move stuff around, meaning that I could, in essence, make this wall longer and it would properly update itself. So I'm going to do that right now. And that is odd. That is odd. Huh. Is that on each side? No, it's just on the back side. Oh, because that's the side I moved. Oh, see here? Here's what happened. I moved this inner side out farther than the outside. Okay, so there's a lesson to be learned there. So if I move this back in, it should be... No, that's the wrong one. If I actually I can move that out. And then let me update this. Go to lit mode. And see, now it's fixed itself. And there's going to be lighting errors. But anyway. At least it's mostly fixed. So be careful about that. Alright, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to make one of these walls longer. And this is after I've applied the texture. So you'll be able to see that it doesn't have a problem auto-updating itself. And I'm actually going to make it taller too, because it's a bit small. Okay, so it's much bigger. The textures are going to have a bit of a problem updating. Now I am going to have to rebuild the lighting as well because I made this bigger. But if I go into lit mode and go inside, see, the textures are fine. So it just scaled itself more up and it just scaled itself more to the side, and they look perfectly fine. But in my opinion, that's kind of repeating itself way too often. I kind of want to change this texture up a little bit. So what I can do, and this is something that you can only really do with CSG, which makes it a bit of an advantage to static meshes, unless of course you make your own custom textures, which then it's not really an advantage at all because you're making custom textures. But you can really edit the texture on how it appears on the CSG. You can't do that with static meshes. You just apply the texture and it fits or it doesn't. So you can right click, do surface properties, and you can edit more than one at a time. So if I select all of these walls, and I can to make it easier, and you would, this is up to you if you want to do this or not, but I can do select surfaces. And again, this is just for the CSG, this pops up. But select surfaces, do adjacent walls. So that will just select all the adjacent walls. And other options for that, you can just see all the different things that are here, and they make sense. Matching texture, resolution, all that good stuff. Select all surfaces, which would just be everything in this room. And then sometimes if you just want to select if you want to select everything except a few things, it's easier just to do all surfaces and control click on the things you don't want. So, however you feel like doing it. But anyway. This actually did select the outside as well. And now one thing to keep in mind is the inside texture and the outside texture, for the sake of the hollow, okay, for the hollow walls and stuff, is two separate things. So I don't want the bottom of this and the top to have the same texture either. So what I'm going to do to make sure that everything's on the same page, I'm going to reapply this texture. Now, it didn't change anything on the inside because they all already had that texture. But now the outside, no, it doesn't. And that's stupid. Now they should all... Okay, my bad. Okay, you can drag, click. Okay, even I forget some things too. Okay, there's a lot to this engine, so I'm sorry. You can drag click from the content browser. If you want to apply it to everything you have selected, you're going to need to right click and then do apply material. So that applies it to there. If I do on lit mode, it applied it to that one. That one I'd already applied it to. It applied it to that one as well. And it reapplied it to all these in here. So there you go. If you want to do it individually, you can just drag and click to do them all. Apply material. So there you go. And just re-show this. I'm going to just select one of these in here. Let me do this one. I'm going to click it, and then all you have to do is apply material. Now they all have that material. But I'm going to change it to the other one because I like the other one better. Okay, so let's get to editing this. So this wall has the best lighting. So let's do surface properties, and it has 8 selected, as you can see. Now anything I do is going to apply it to every one of these walls. So, you know, if you don't want it, if you want each wall to be a little different, then obviously you can't do this. But because it tells me I have 8 surfaces selected, so you know it's not like you're gonna be wondering why the other walls got changed and you didn't have them selected. So it's very good about letting you know what is selected and what's not. So I can pan this in 2 directions. U being horizontally. I don't know why it's U, but you can see that the texture is just shifting. And it's shifting it this way actually into the wall. So if, unfortunately there isn't, it would be really awesome if they could do this, but unfortunately there is not currently a way to do this where you can change the texture in-game. Like, have some event that changes the texture settings or something on this walls, because otherwise you could have it like moving, and that would be like a really cool effect. And actually let me do 4, so you could have it like going like really fast like that or something. I'm clicking as fast as I can, but that anyway that's just me. And obviously you can see you can go at different values. So 64 in this case, that's just really fast. Zoom, you know, you can do a certain amount if you feel like you want to. Rotation is interesting. You know that, and some of the stuff you can really change up the textures a lot if you're very smart with it, depending on how you do this. And as we go through, you know, there's other options here, but as we go through, you can see that, so that you can actually have the same texture applied to different walls, but you change it up slightly so that it looks similar, but it's not exactly the same. And the user's eyes don't get bored, because if you're playing a game, you can usually tell when someone is repeating the same texture throughout a wall. So if you're very careful and smart, you can flip a texture upside down, and it'll look a little bit different. Now the lines in this case will all line up. So real quick, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just flip this one texture this way and let you look. See, oh, they don't line up. Well, then what you could do is just move it up some, because this one goes up, or the other way, whatever, up and down. So I can just move this texture up so that it lines up there. And I mean, I didn't get it exact. You'd have to get it exact. And these like spots and stuff on the wall, they don't line up exactly. The bars do. So the user thinks that it, not the user, the player thinks that it's, you know, that that's how it's built, but these don't line up exactly, so they don't think it's the same exact texture, and that's just kind of a design tip that you can kind of use, kind of change things up just a bit, and of course you have to be careful because the lines, like I said, they were going to match up and they didn't, but this is probably not one of the best textures to do this with, and it is repeating itself multiple times, so that's kind of a nuisance, and I'll show you how you can fix that in a minute. But let's rotate this 45 degrees and select all adjacent walls and make sure that the outside is selected. No. So we'll do select all surfaces, not this one, not that one, Not that one, I mean. And not that one. Okay. So now we're good. And I don't really have to edit the ones on the back, but I'm just showing you can do this with a lot of different things. Okay, surface properties. So now what we're going to do is, I've showed you, you've got up and down. You can hold shift, as it says right here. You can hold shift and it'll go in the opposite direction. So I can do like this, and then I can go this way. Well, that's not a good example. So there you go. And you've got your flipping and all that kind of stuff. Flip. So this basically flips the texture to be backwards. It's kind of what it's doing. So there is a much better example that I could have shown. Is you can just flip the texture backwards, so that they still appear in the same spots, but it's like further. It's like in a different section. Okay, that's not right. They don't appear in the same spots, like the markings and stuff on the wall. So it would be a little different looking from a player's point of view. All right. Now the other thing I use in here is the alignment and the scaling. So if I did 16 and apply it, it's actually just scaling the texture up 16. So there you go. You've got this, and this one's still out of order and it's bugging me, but whatever. Actually, let me do this. Let me reapply the texture. Let me apply a different texture. That one, and then we can go switch back to that, and it's still broken. I should never have messed with it. Should never mess with it. Stupid OCD. I'm not really OCD. I'm just okay. Anyway, so you can change, the size of that. There's one. Now this one you could drive someone crazy with, but there you go. Now, I mean, you have to be careful when using this, because like I said, CSG has CSG can render multiple times a texture. It can render a texture multiple times sometimes when in the level. So with this, it would have to render each one of these little dots. Not dots, but squares of the texture set multiple times. So you want to be careful with that. It kind of looks interesting, but anyway. And 8, there's the different things. You can do custom. So remember, U is horizontal, V is vertical. So just if you can remember V for vertical, then the other is just, U is just the opposite of that. So that would be horizontal. Now these also are interesting. You can't have both. You can't have an alignment and then this, because the alignment kind of, well, I say things and then I'm wrong, and that makes me look bad. I'm sorry, okay? But some of it, well, I mean, like with some of this, because like if you do default, it changes that, and then you can do that, and it kind of changes it up. So that's kind of what I meant. But the planar, the planier, doesn't really change anything. Box. It doesn't change anything. With some of the textures, it will actually kind of flip it a different way. So, sometimes it changes things, sometimes it doesn't. But, then, so there we go. You have a difference there. That one. So, not too much of a difference. Fit is just actually going to fit it so that the whole texture only displays one time across the surface. Now, as long as one of these surfaces isn't taller than another one, then it should be fine, because it can stretch it out endlessly sideways. So that's really not too much of a problem, but as long as one of these isn't like taller than the other, then they'll all line up. So the markings on the wall is going to be a little more stretched than these. So you do want to be careful that you don't stretch the texture too much. So sometimes you may want to add, if I go into the geometry editor real quick, you may want to add like a split or something to one of the vertices. And what that'll actually do is divide it up so that you have two textures. So let me do that real quick so I can show you what I mean. Let me switch to, okay, exit out of that, please. So it may take me a bit. Okay, there we go. split it. Now what's going to happen? Rebuild this real quick. Now go back in here. It looks the same. Looks the same. And it does look the same, which is odd because the texture was supposed. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So like I said, the CSG is usually pretty good about the textures because it actually added because the texture was already applied to the whole thing. It just reapplied it to the second one. But now I actually have two separate walls that I can edit independently from each other. So if I do default, this one's default, this one is not. But what this allows me to do is it won't be quite as a stretch. So if you look technically, this one had the original texture from the whole wall spread across. Okay. This one, and you have to look carefully at this. You can actually see a line now that I've split it. Now that they're slightly different, because before it was actually adequately spread across so that it would look good. Because see this like hook line right here? The hook line is there, but before it was intersecting with this one. It was kind of joining in with this one. So that's why there's the line there now. But now it's kind of more stretched out than this one. I can go over here, do surface properties, fit. Wow, that's weird. That's not what I want. There. Okay. And now it's not quite as spread out, and I flipped it 45 degrees, so it's probably screwed up. Okay. I should just be flipping it 90 degrees. I'm an idiot. Okay. Fit. That's odd. I don't know why it's doing that. You still have that little line there, which is annoying. So I guess what you could do, just flip that. There, that kind of sort of fixed it. So that helped some. Still the line there, but anyway, you can see what I mean by because now it's actually repeating the texture twice along this distance. So it's not stretching it out quite as much, and you can use that to your advantage. In this case, you really wouldn't have wanted to do that because it's such a small room. It was more trouble than it was worth. But on really long walls, it can be quite useful. So, and it's actually split the floor too, but because again, it was already spread across the whole thing, the texture looks fine. And it was actually just one big texture, is what it is. So, yeah, we can go ahead in here and look at this. And the lighting needs to be freaking rebuilt. Dang it. Come on. There we go. Okay, there. So now we actually have a bit of shadowing in the corners, and it looks pretty decent. And you can see that where the light is actually at is up there, but yeah, see, that's not too incredibly noticeable. A little noticeable, but not too bad. From a distance, you could hardly tell it's there. So, you know, there's your materials and stuff. And, you know, you can mess around with the materials and all that on your own time. It's easy once you start messing around with it. And stuff like that. But the other thing you're probably wondering at this point is, you know, there's no door, there's no windows. How are you supposed to get into this room? Because if you can only make cubes, well, I mean, you can make other shapes, but like if we're working with cubes and you can really only do like a hollow cube or just a completely filled in cube, how are you supposed to make a door? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a good question, your question that you're wondering, right? So at this point, and I wanted to kind of cover how the materials work because that's going to play in a role in with the whole subtraction brushes. Because like I was talking about how it's usually pretty good about updating correctly. So you can kind of see that come into action here in just a second. But we can, if we maneuver this around, and I'm actually going to right click and deselect hollow because we don't need it to be hollow. That'll kind of mess things up. And just maneuver it around a little bit, kind of get it semi-good. We don't have to get it perfect because we can always move the brush later. And if we go and we do subtract, what's going to happen is nothing at first because apparently we completely missed it. Brush wireframe. And this is yellow. This one's yellow to show you that it's different. I'm going to move this so it's just a bit inside, lit, and build it. Now we have a hole. Okay, now I'm going to move this up some. Rebuild. And it's kind of cutting in just a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about it because otherwise I'd sit there all day long trying to fix it. But now, so you can see it cut in nicely and it's fine, though it didn't actually place texture along here and the sides here. So you'd have to place a texture, and then you could fit it so that it fit in nicely. You would want to have to edit a little bit so that it wasn't like the entire texture crammed in this little tiny space. But you can fiddle with it like you want. Subtraction brushes, when you start to mess with them, it's going to cause a lot of these checkered areas to start appearing around in places that you didn't expect them to start, because it's creating all this extra surface area. So you want to be wary of that. And if you recall from earlier, you can click on this F4 and you could change this to an additive brush. So now it's an additive brush instead of a subtractive brush. So you can do that if you wish to. Okay. Now, one thing I want to also talk about, because this is going to play a role in a minute, is the way the brushes interact with each other. This is a subtractive brush. The other is an additive brush. And if you've done any basic math, you can pick up these terms, add, subtract. What is basically going on here is the additive brush is adding CSG to the level. And the level's like, okay, we got some CSG in here. Are there any subtractive brushes? Aha, there is one. Now, what it's doing is it's determining, okay, here is the size of the subtractive brush. If there is any additive brush inside of here, we're going to take that out. So we're forming a hole in the CSG because we have a subtractive brush. But it does the additive brush first, and this is very important. Okay. Now, when we build the level, when we build the geometry, there's hardly any lag at all. It's just like pretty instant, quick. And you don't really see a difference, of it. I don't really know if it's first or not. It's all just done. It's all kind of done at the same time. But when it is calculating, it adds the CSG first, then subtracts from what's already added. Okay, you told me that. How is that important at all? Well, if you right-click on this, and you can do this with the additive brush as well, okay? And you're only going to use this with the additive brush, so let me actually just switch to that instead of doing it with this one, because doing it with a subtractive brush is just stupid, because it's not going to do anything at all. But if you right-click here, there's actually an order. So now this is only if you've actually selected the brush itself, not the texture, okay? So that's important. And oh, there you go. You can change to add, subtract right there if you wish to. I forgot about that. But you can do to first or to last. Now, if I hit to last, watch what happens. Okay. Let me rebuild this. The hole is gone. Now, what happened is it's calculated the subtractive brush first. So it's like, okay, it looks around, the level's like, okay, where's the additive brushes? Additive brushes, there are no additive brushes. So, subtractive brushes, what about you? There you are, okay, let's subtract from that area. It's subtracting from nothing at this point. And it's like, okay, next, you, additive brush over there. Okay, let's add you in. Okay, regardless of the fact that it's already done the subtractive brush. So that can be a little confusing at first because you're thinking, but the brush is there, but it's there and it's subtracting. It's right there. But it's kind of a really useful feature, and I'll show you how that can be useful in just a second. So let me set this back to first. Rebuild this. Bam. And what I'm going to do And I prefer doing this with the geometry editor instead of fiddling with this thing. So I'm just going to real quick add in that, move that out of the way, and switch to this mode, switch to here, go there. And I'm going to shrink this down, the top of this. Now I didn't do hollow on purpose because I don't want this to be hollow on the inside because it's basic. I'm just basically making a platform right now. So I'm going to bring this out, and then I'm going to exit this, and I note I can't actually edit any faces and stuff, so I have the whole brush selected. And I'm going to bring this up. And if you haven't guessed by now what I'm doing, I'm actually going to put this on the inside of the subtractive brush. So what's going to happen is I'm going to carve out a hole for a door, and there's going to be a platform here. But this subtractive brush is kind of a bit on the inside of the platform. Now, preferably, now I'm not saying that there is no use for this in the practical world. There is one. I'm just making a quick example. Now, preferably this particular situation, you wouldn't need to use the order because you would get this lined up perfectly so that the floor would be straight all across. There's like a little bit of a dip, but I'm just trying to demonstrate this. So I'm actually going to move this subtractive brush down just a bit to kind of illustrate this a bit more. So now it's really inside. So you can agree, okay, that this is in the subtractive brush is on the inside of it. But I'm going to put this to last. What's gonna now? What this is pretty cool actually. So I'm going to build this, and voila. Okay, this actually carved up enough that the subtractive brush that actually cut out a hole right here. But this is still here. Okay, this is still here. So if we jump in, I'm gonna have to rebuild my lighting real quick. See, the lighting can get really, really annoying at times. Okay. So, you know, there it is. This is not big enough for me to really fall through. Like I said, ideally you would get, you know, this all matched up with the floor, so it wouldn't be too much of a big deal. But you can see we have this opening we can go through, but we still have a platform. So that's how that works. And you can do this with multiple things, all kind of interacting with each other. And the reason that I said doing this with, like, setting the order for the subtractive brush would be stupid is because regardless of whether you've set one of the additive brushes to last, the subtractive brush is also set to last. So there's not like first, second, third, fourth. If one thing is set to first, then that'll calculate. Okay, let me. I'll probably have like a on-screen words appear as well to kind of emphasize this. But just as a kind of final wrapping up statement for this particular topic, the way that the prioritization works with the additive and subtractive brushes is that by default, additives are always first. So additives are always first. So it will add in, okay, then subtract by default. If you set an additive brush to last, it will calculate all other additive brushes except the one you set to last first. Then it will calculate all subtractive brushes. Then any additive brushes that you've set to last, it will then calculate. And the subtractive brushes will not affect those at all. The subtractive brushes, if you set one of those to last, additive brushes still get added in first. But what happens is that, let me just create a scenario, okay? You have 3 additive brushes. One of them you set to last. And you have 2 subtractive brushes, okay? One of them is set normally to first. The other one is set to last. The level calculates. The 2 additive brushes get added, okay? The third additive brush, which is set to last, does not. It starts calculating the subtractive brushes. One subtractive brush is set to first. Now, this is going to subtract whatever the shape is, like a doorway or a window or whatever. It's going to subtract that shape, and then it's going to be fine. And it's going to subtract that, and the third additive brush, the second one now, the second subtractive brush is set to last. So it's not going to calculate it this time. But because additive brushes are always first, what's going to happen is it's going to add that additive brush in. It's going to add the additive brush in, and then it's going to ignore the first subtractive brush, which was to first, because you set the additive brush to last. Hopefully this is making sense. But then the second subtractive brush, which was set to last, is then going to calculate, and it's just going to subtract from everything. So it's kind of pointless for you to do that, because then the whole point of having the to last for the additive brushes is then denied by the fact that you set a subtractive brush to last. So it still calculates at the very end. There wouldn't be a reason for you to need to ever do that, because the first subtractive brush was just subtracting from everything, and then except the one brush, additive brush, that was set to last. The second subtractive brush, which was set to last, then just subtracted from everything in the end. So there really was no point to that. Hopefully that makes sense. If it didn't, you can put in the comments and I can kind of better explain it to then. I'm trying to say this where it makes sense, because it kind of took me a bit to kind of figure out how it was all like working together and stuff, because I was having issues with it at one point. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that, because then once you do, you can do some really neat things. You know, like this whole platform thing I made. It's not the neatest thing that there is, but you know, you can do much better stuff with geometry and whatnot than I in this particular example, of course. But you can begin to make some really cool things with the additive and subtractive brushes in it, working together like that. So that is about it that I have, really, on additive and subtractive brushes and the CSG and how all that works. That's about it. That's about all you really need to know. Now, I mean, there is the other thing with the intersect and de-intersect. Essentially, how that works, I'll briefly touch on this. How this works is, okay. I'm going to set this one to, well, you know what, to intersect. Now, actually no, I'm just going to delete this to begin with. Alright, now I'm going to copy this, copy, paste, drag it out, and set this to de-intersect, or intersect. Kind of how this is work, and it's kind of sort of confusing a little bit, and it's not really all that useful, but it's going to just basically kind of create, oh wait, you know what, no, it's not going to work because I have to use the builder brush. That's right, my bad. Dumb. Okay, if I stick this on the inside, do intersect. So it did that, like it shrunk it down. It didn't actually place a brush itself. That's what it was. It didn't actually place a brush. It was just formatting it. So I can click the cube, and if I de-intersect is going to do this. It's rather confusing, to be honest. I'm not really entirely sure how it works. It's kind of like a formatting it. It's not placing a brush. It's formatting the brush itself to a certain shape. And I remember seeing a tutorial on the thing. It was kind of supposed to be where it would just like take the shape that is, it would take a shape, like intersecting would be, it would take the shape of whatever the area that it is occupying in, and then opposite for de-intersect, it would take the shape that whatever's not occupying another thing. But that's not really what it's doing here, as you can see. That's what I thought it was supposed to do. Because I had looked at a tutorial on it, but that's not what it's doing. It's being weird. And maybe just because it's subtractive brush. Let me drag it over here real quick. De-intersect. Intersect. Yeah, see, that's just acting strange. So unfortunately for this, I don't really know what to tell you. Because, there it goes. Okay, now it's working. Now it was being strange. Okay, there we go. It was messing up with the subtractive brush because it's a subtractive brush and it's being weird. I'm sorry. Okay, so intersect. Bam. It's actually just adhered itself to just this portion of the thing because that was the only thing that was intersecting. De-intersect. Actually, I have to convert it back first. Because, alright, let me show you why I was doing that. I do intersect, and if I do de-intersect, because there's actually nothing that isn't not intersecting this, then it's just going to not be anything at all. It's going to be null. So if I do de-intersect, see, what's happening is it's converting its shape to what's not there. And that's rather odd. It's actually just created a bit of a hole on the inside. So, that's weird, but anyway, hopefully you understand that. Like if I do intersect now, that was the only part that was inside. Let me stick more of it in there. De-intersect. So it's kind of created like this whole. I don't see again. Like what I looked up it was supposed to take the shape of everything that was outside of this shape over here. That's obviously not what you're seeing. And now if I do intersect, because I guess technically the game there's nothing in here, so it converts it to nothing at all. The intersect is of course useful if you're wanting to do if you wanted to create an easy subtractive brush, because now all I have to do is just do a subtractive brush and I have a doorway here. But anyway, that is of course much easier for doorway. I was just done with the subtractive brush, and I do apologize sometimes that I stumble over stuff. I could record in advance so that I make sure I don't have any issues, but I kind of like to just not seem so professional. Because I don't know, personally I think it kind of makes the tutorial seem a little better because I'm just like another person. And it just seems a little bit more normal rather than like really professional and like a teacher up there doing stuff. You know, oh, I'm a big teacher. I'm paid to talk about this kind of stuff. You know, I'm just a person sitting in my room recording myself, you know, talking about here's how you do stuff in UDK. And if I mess up a little bit, it just makes me look more human, I guess. And I'm not trying to, I don't know. Personally, I just kind of like it better that way because I like doing tutorials like I'd like to be taught. And yes, I don't like seeing a person make a mistake, but at the same time I know that they're making mistakes, so I don't feel bad if I make a couple mistakes as well. Maybe it's kind of the thinking going on there, but anyway, that in and of itself kind of wraps up the CSG. That's really about it. Just remember, of course, you know, that you need to rebuild geometry for some stuff if it's not updating correctly. You know, make sure that you rebuild your geometry. Always make sure you rebuild your geometry. And this will give you an error if you need to do that. Paths need to rebuild, which is not important right now. But this will tell you that you need geometry or lighting rebuilt if, you know, you're encountering some stuff with that. But, and of course, make sure you check your orders too, because I've had some times where I would like change the order of something, and then end up later needing it to be changed, but had forgotten had done it, so some stuff wasn't working. And just make sure that you are changing your orders, and don't change the orders of subtractive brushes because then it won't work like you want it to. So always change the order of the additive brushes, and you know, use your geometry tool. Because geometry tools are cool. That rhymed. Cool. Alright, that's about it. Feedback is appreciated because I can't get better if I don't know that I've done something wrong. I always keep the original video files At least I try to. I'll start deleting them if I run out of space, but I've got like 500 gigabytes of unused space on my computer right now, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to hang on to these for a while. But I keep the original video file, so if you think that the video as a whole is pretty okay, but you want to say, I didn't really see something really well, could you maybe like zoom it in on certain parts, then I can do that easily. I mean, I can't get it done immediately because render times are kind of brutal for videos these long, especially doing 720p. I'm recording at 1080p, but sometimes it doesn't want to render out at 1080 for some stupid reason. But anyway, just let me know and I can try to fix stuff. If you have questions, let me know. I can try to answer them. And ideas for future tutorials as well. I can't do everything. Like, I know some people have asked me, can you tell me how to do, like, importing weapons and stuff? I don't really know. Like, I can't do coding. Because importing a weapon would be more of code side rather than the UDK level design side. I do know how to code, but not in UDK. I don't know the UDK language. Okay, it's not that I'm like not a coder. I'm learning a different language at the moment. I'm learning Java at the moment. I know how to do that really well. Well, relatively well. I'm not like a master. The beginning basic stuff, I've made like small little games and stuff. But I'm learning Java at the moment. I don't know UDK code. Which is like a version of C++ that's a little different for specifically Unreal Engine. It's called Unreal Script. So stuff that requires coding I'm not going to be able to do. But other than that, leave suggestions for future tutorials, and I can try my best to get to it. I can't promise everything, but anyway, that's about it, all that I have. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.